Hey guys, this is Kieran from MSK Physio, and today's exercise is about the very early stages of starting to build some hip internal rotation. It's going to be a bit more of an active exercise. So if you're sort of not sure what internal rotation at the hip looks like or feels like, or you're just sort of starting on that journey of trying to regain it, this is a really good place to start. So when we're trying to regain control of an area, or we try to regain sort of strength or mobility in an area, what you want to probably do in terms of principles around the exercise setup is have that ground involved. And the reason the ground being involved helps is it gives you more points of contact on your body in terms of an external environment, and it means I get more feedback about where I am in space. So for example, if I'm standing up, I've just got my feet touching the ground. If I'm on my hands and knees, now I have my feet touching, my knees touching, and my hands touching. If I'm laying down, now I've got torso muscles and all these things picking up information about where I am. And that information gives me reference points. And that means that I can then execute movement a little bit differently and learn how to create tension in areas maybe that I haven't created tension in a while. And for a lot of people, hip internal rotation is one of those tensions. And it's a necessary movement that we talk about in one of our other videos about it allows you to be able to squat, it allows you to be able to lunge and run and just do movements that you need day to day. There's the added benefit of performance coming from increased range, say in sprinting as well. But at the early stages, when we start building hip internal rotation, it's first about being able to centrate the hip when we're on our back as a kid. So if I'm on my back like this, my knee being over my hip, both here, but also here. So it's not off to the side, it's being able to be centrated. Now, this is going to be a bit more of an externally rotated position where people tend to rest a little bit. But as you get out of this and you start getting into prone positions, so positions on the tummy, this is where we start to see some internal rotation being biased a bit. And what it does is it sets us up for a crawl position. So if I bring my right knee up, now I'm in a hip flexed, abducted position, okay? And our hip flexors, our hip internal rotators are usually first and foremost dominant in other planes, and that's hip flexion for our TFL and abduction for our glute med. Now, the internal rotation ability for them is going to change a little bit depending on if my leg is out to the side here, or if it's in front and I start twisting my leg in. By being out in the side here, I'm encouraging some shortening already. So it's like they have to work the internal rotation because they're already short in the other planes, which means they can't actually do as much work in those planes. So it's kind of a nice cheat way to make sure it does the internal rotation, okay? So you can start prone like this, and you start lifting your heel off the ground. And you can just rest down. You could lift up and hold. You could do reps. You might find when you start that you can only get a tiny little bit off the ground. That'll improve a little bit as your groin muscles increase, which are also some internal rotators, sort of an increase in their ability to do their work. And by that, it could be me opening up here. If you can't open up comfortably here, because you get discomfort in, say, the hip, then don't bring your knee as high. Bring it a little bit more down into here. And then you can start working an internal rotation this way. It's going to be a little less demand on the hip joint flexibility. To increase the difficulty, you're going to bring yourself off the ground. My elbows are going to be forward of my shoulders, and it's going to be out wide, kind of like I'm hugging something. I'm trying to really protract or push the ground away from me. And I'm creating some fixation points with my hands, so I'm going to be pushing into the ground, really getting tall and looking forward. And while I'm here, I'm going to really emphasize inhalation and exhalation. Exhalation is going to give me more tightness through my abdomen, which is going to allow my hip more mobility. When I inhale, I'm going to get a little bit less mobility. So for example, if I inhale, that's as high as I can lift my foot. And if I exhale, that's how high I can lift. So it's not to say that you need to exhale every single time you do the internal rotation, but you need to be comfortable internally rotating whether you're inhaling or exhaling, because there's always a bit of a opposite going on depending on which leg's in front and which one's behind when you're moving. So I'm going to inhale and exhale. Exhale to the point where you feel some corset tightness around your abdomen and your sides. You might even feel some cramping through the side over here. And over time, you're going to get more and more range, and you're going to eventually get up quite high. You can add then the next challenge, which is reaching this way. By reaching, I need to be more stable now because I've lost a point of contact. I've lost this arm and forearm touching the ground, which means my other points of contact need to create more tension. If they don't create enough tension, then this point of contact is going to lose mobility. So I need to create good tension with my right elbow and the front of my left hip around my pocket. So that's around this area here. There's a bone there, and you can get that pushed into the ground, okay? So if I'm pushing that down into the ground, that might be a foreign movement for some of you, and I'm pushing this elbow down, and now as I reach, see how I've lost a little bit of range? But if I bring this hand down, the range is much more. So there's going to be a limit to the amount you can have based on the contact points, but it's just illustrating that idea that more contact means more points of reference, which means more safety, which means more flexibility to demonstrate. And as I remove those points of contact, I'm going to lose mobility. Where people get stuck is when they don't go to that range often enough, and being in all this contact points right now, and they still can't get range. And so they've created a fixation point down at the hip for really what I'm doing right now is stabilizing my torso. So it's something to work through, and you're better to create fixation at the torso when you ask the peripheral joints like the shoulder and the hip to start mobilizing. So that's a lot of ramble, but basically what we're saying is for the end expression of this in terms of progression, before you move on to sort of the seated progressions, get yourself nice and tall, push yourself away from the ground, bring the hip up and down, and when you're doing it, also reach and add in that stability challenge, making sure that you can still inhale and exhale, and that you still have the ability for this to move willingly, okay? Give those a go. Really potent hip internal rotation exercise. If you like this video, then please hit like below. Otherwise, to check out more of our content in the future, you can subscribe to our channel by clicking our logo over here. And to check out our latest video, click up here.